gave you some information from Veterans for Peace, and it seems like Veterans for Peace, which is, by the way, becoming a larger organization, especially in the sense that it's getting its word around. But if you see the Veterans for Peace flag flying at various demonstrations, a black and white emblem, it's become a recognizable symbol of a change from Veterans for Peace and Marine Corps League and the American Legion and various others who have supported all wars, whereas the Veterans for Peace, of course, feel that they have individuals, they have evolved into an anti-war group and believing that no war is a just war. Now we need, it's about 8/11, right? So we need some people to ring the bell because it was around that time that this particular event occurred. So if we just ring the bell, you know, I hate to put the onus on Fred, but I don't know of anyone better equipped here to say a prayer extemporaneously. He has nothing prepared, but if you don't mind, Fred, even if it's silence, whenever you would. Let us pray together. Our gracious God, we come before you, acknowledging that we are human beings in distress. We are aware that children of God continue to kill children of God. We come before you asking forgiveness for our part in hate as we try to seek pathways to love, as we seek ways to convince the leaders of the world to choose a peaceful path to enrich life rather than to destroy life. Help us this day as we ring this bell to allow the bell to sound something for the people of Binghamton, to remind them that there is a better way, a nonviolent way to lift up human beings and enrich life rather than to destroy life. Be with us this day. Allow us to step following the path of peace. We ask this in our Lord's name. Amen.
Amen.
A song of peace for lands afar and mine. At slaughter, we fell on our knees and prayed for guidance. Arrupe had studied medicine many years earlier. I had studied medicine many years earlier, and I ran back to the house to find medical supplies. I found the medicine chest under some ruins with the door off its hinges and retrieved some iodine, aspirin, and bicarbonate of soda. Those were the only supplies at a time when 200,000 victims needed help. What could I do? I fell on my knees and implored God's help. What he did was he turned the Jesuit residence into a makeshift temporary hospital. They could only house about 150. After 12 hours later, they managed to get into the city, into Hiroshima itself. There was another Jesuit house in Hiroshima. Before us lay a city. An indescribable spectacle met our gaze, a macabre vision which staggered the imagination. a city completely destroyed. More terrible, however, was the tragic sight of those thousands of injured people begging for help. One such child had a piece of glass embedded in the pupil of his left eye, and another had a large wooden splinter protruding like a dagger from between his ribs. Sobbing, he called out, "Father, save me." Another victim was caught between two beams with his legs calcified up to his knees. A young man ran to us half crazed and calling for help. The flames had already burned his mother. He'd watched his mother burn to death. We were to witness, I'm not reading every word here because I don't want to take too much time. We were to witness more horrible scenes that night. As we approached the river, the spectacle was awful beyond words. Fleeing the flames and availing themselves of low tide, the people lay across both shores. But in the middle of the night, the tide began to rise, and the wounded, exhausted now and half buried in mud, could not move. The cries of those drowning are something I shall never forget. He talks about they did what they felt they had to do. They celebrated Mass, and you called on God to be present to help them know what to do. One of the things he mentions, among all the cases that we treated, perhaps what will cause us the most suffering were the children. Everyone knows that in Japan, children are adored. They take extreme care to such a degree that there is no illiteracy in Japan. All go to primary and secondary school, all know how to read and write. At the time of the atomic bomb, most of the children were in their respective schools at 8:15 in the morning. For that reason, during the explosion, thousands of children were separated from their parents. Many were wounded and cast into the streets without being able to fend for themselves. We brought all we could to Nagatsuka and began treating them immediately so as to prevent infections and fever. We had absolutely no anesthetics, and some of the children were horribly wounded. Our hearts were torn, I'm skipping again. Our hearts were torn again during these treatments, but the greater was the consolation of being able to restore some of these children to their parents. The Japanese police, who were well organized, were able to contact all the families whose children we had in the home. 50,000 died the moment of the explosion itself, 200,000 during the following weeks, and others much later as the result of wounds or radiation. What was heartbreaking was some of these people seemed perfectly well right at the day of on August 6th, but several weeks later came down with fevers and other symptoms and died. What happened? What happened? The atomic bomb. Well, we've seen how terrible it is. What is it? And all they would see is the atomic bomb. The atomic bomb. Nobody knew what had happened. All they knew was there some word. They knew nothing of the name. It was a new word that was coming for the first time into the vocabulary. Besides the knowledge that it was the atomic bomb that had exploded, that was no help to us at all from a medical standpoint, as no one in the world knew its full effects on the human organism. We were, in effect, the first guinea pigs in such experimentation. And I'm sure we could read. I didn't want to take too much time to read all of it, but it just struck me with the children, the people being drowned in the river because they couldn't move. They were so wounded and exhausted. But also that this is not the first time that children were separated from their parents. And all hell broke loose.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's pretty powerful, Jim. Here too, and how do you get not just children but younger people to remember what we're remembering, about a dozen of us here?